All right, let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're going to completely fundamentally rethink something you probably do every single day without even a second thought. We're talking about reading. And honestly, by the end of our time together, you might just realize you've been doing it kind of wrong your entire life.
We're going to start by shattering a pretty massive illusion right out of the gate. Because according to Mortimer Adler's classic 1940 work, which he later revised with Charles Van Doren in '72, just because you can decode words on a page doesn't actually make you a reader. So yeah, simply being literate doesn't mean you're truly reading.
And this idea perfectly illustrates the massive paradigm shift we need to make today. Take the passive consumer, for example. Let's be real, most of us operate this way. We decode the words, we treat the text like a bucket just waiting to be emptied into our brains, and we just passively absorb information. But we've got to shift that mindset. We need to become what Adler calls an active X-rayer. That means you're actually thinking with the text. You're engaging in a back-and-forth conversation, treating the book like a living argument that's just begging to be interrogated.
So, to understand how to become that active X-rayer, let's look at reading as an active conversation, and why leaving a physical trace is literally a game changer.
The absolute crucial point here is that true reading is really a Socratic, inquiry-based dialogue between you and the author. If a book is completely over your head, well, reading it the right way should literally lift you up to its level. The goal isn't just to stockpile facts, we're aiming for actual enlightenment. You have to treat the book like a partner in a conversation.
And to actually pull off this conversation, Adler insists you have to leave a physical trace. A trace of a mind actively wrestling with the text. You've got to mark it up. Seriously, true ownership requires physical engagement. Underline those key arguments, circle the critical words, scribble your unfiltered notes right there in the margins. Because, a pristine, untouched book is basically an unread book. Those messy, inked-up marks, they're the ultimate proof that some actual rigorous thinking took place.
All right, let's move on to Adler's core framework, the 4 levels of reading, which acts as our ladder of mastery.
This ladder really shows how we build up our understanding. It's a highly structured sequence, and there's no cheating here. You absolutely cannot skip a level. You start right at the bottom with basic sentence decoding at level 1, elementary reading. Then you step up to inspectional reading, then analytical reading all the way up to the top, where you're constructing original comparative thoughts at level 4, syntopopical reading.
Now, what's super fascinating here is how inspectional reading is framed. A lot of folks think skimming is just being lazy. But not at all. Adler frames this as a hyper-disciplined 15-minute book autopsy. It's how you figure out the book's main argument before you commit your precious time to a deep dive. So, you read the title and preface, you study the table of contents, think of it as your map before entering unfamiliar territory. Check the index, read the last few pages where authors almost always hide their summaries, and just dip into random chapters. It's absolutely essential scaffolding.
Once we've thoroughly inspected the text, it's time to step up to analytical reading, which means deep reading in 3 specific stages. This level is where things get real. It demands total comprehension before you're even allowed to pass judgment. A lot of readers totally rush this process, but you really have to respect these 3 stages. First up is the structural stage, where you classify the architecture of the book. Second is the interpretive stage, where you get clear on the author's specific keywords. And finally, the critical stage, where you step back and critique objectively with actual, informed reasons.
Let's zoom in on that interpretive stage for a second. During this phase, you absolutely must come to terms with what the author's words actually mean. Take a word like justice, for example. That word means something wildly different to an ancient philosopher like Plato than it does to a modern thinker like John Rawls. If you skip this stage and just project your own definitions onto the text, you end up arguing against a complete caricature of the author's actual position.
And that brings us to Adler's single most demanding rule for the critical stage. He says, criticism without comprehension is noise. That hits hard, right? You literally must be able to accurately restate the author's argument and say, okay, I understand, before you ever earn the right to say I agree or I disagree. Just having a vague disagreement isn't a critique, it's honestly just a refusal to engage. Finally, we reach the peak, the most demanding level on the ladder, syntopical reading. This is where true original research begins. This level is the absolute bedrock for deep research and original thinking. Let's say you're diving into a massive topic, like inequality. You might read Adam Smith, Karl Marx, and Thomas Piketty. But here's the catch. You can't use Marx's terms to judge Smith. You have to construct your own completely neutral analytical language. You're mapping out how these wildly different authors answer the exact same questions about things like capital, value, and the causes of inequality. You are acting as the bridge between their frameworks to forge your own original thoughts.
To fuel this entire climb up that reading ladder, Adler gives us the 4 crucial questions. Think of this as your solo Socratic method.
First up, you have to ask yourself, what is this book about as a whole? Before you get bogged down in the tiny details, you need to step back and identify the big picture architecture and the central overarching argument the author is trying to make.
Second, you ask, what is being said in detail? This is the part where you roll up your sleeves, come to terms with the author's specific vocabulary, and meticulously track their logic. You really have to trace the exact steps they take to build their case. Third, is it true? And hey, notice how this is step 3, not step 1. Only after you've fully grasped what's being claimed do you actually get to critically assess the argument's validity. This is where you look at the evidence and decide, okay, is the author misinformed, uninformed, or maybe just completely illogical?
And the fourth question, what of it? Or in other words, why does this even matter? You've got to evaluate the real-world significance and the implications of what you just read. Answering this question is absolutely crucial because it grounds you in reality and stops you from tumbling down pointless research rabbit holes.
Applying these steps and asking these questions all leads to our ultimate goal, achieving a liberal education by adapting to the genre.
Because, let's be honest, exactly what kind of book you're partnering with totally changes the rules of engagement. Whether you're hunting for actionable steps in a practical how-to book, immersing yourself in the created world of a novel without hunting for arguments, or trying to solve dense societal problems in a philosophy text, the overarching goal is always fair integration and constructive criticism, no matter the discipline.
When you finally internalize these habits, the messy margin notes, the glossary of terms you're keeping, the rigorously restated propositions, you realize something really profound. Reading is fundamentally a highly rigorous cognitive exercise. It's actually a form of thinking in itself, not just some passive vehicle for it.
In Adler's grand vision with all of this, it's to equip us with a true liberal education. In the classical sense, that means the education of a free person. It completely transforms reading from a casual, passive hobby into a deliberate, active methodology. It empowers all of us to think freely and deeply about the absolute most complex topics in human history.
So I really want to leave you with this thought. The very next time you open a book, are you just going to sit there, let your eyes glaze over, and blindly absorb the words? Or are you going to grab a pen, start interrogating that text, and genuinely spark up a conversation? The choice is yours. Are you ready to stop passively decoding and start truly reading?